started and kind of frame us up here on why advocacy matters.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation to be part of this group. I see some familiar names and a lot of people to meet, and I appreciate this opportunity. So now I'm going to do this horrible thing to try to share my screen and make sure it works. I'm going to ask if you could just confirm that we've got a full screen. Yeah, I see a thumbs up and all that.
Yeah.
All right. So we're here for Advocacy That Works, and I appreciate that. As we have this conversation, I'd like to kind of throw out two questions for y'all to think about. After you hear this, what do you think will work best for engaging with the legislature, which is one of West Virginia Trail's three goals or priorities? And, what are you personally thinking about doing now as a result of hearing that? So kind of keep those questions in mind. Let's talk about the purpose of advocacy. Why do we advocate? And what I plan to do in this presentation is just kind of talk about advocacy. I'm going to give a little vignette of how trail advocates might advocate and talk about how we see at West Virginia Rivers advocacy becoming more and more involved and going up the steps of the pyramid of advocacy that you'll see here. So, purpose of advocacy is really pretty simple from our point of view. We want to let our elected officials know our opinion. If you're at the state level, we're talking to delegates and senators. If we're in Washington, we're talking to representatives and senators. But don't forget, mayors and city council and county commissions make decisions about trails at the local level. So we advocate to let them know what we think should be done. And we want to influence their decision. I said legislators' decision, but any decision maker's decision on a pending plan. And there's kind of two ways of doing that. We want to pass favorable trail-oriented bills, and we maybe want to stop a bad bill that's got a bad provision or a provision that we don't particularly like. And although this talk is going to kind of, and your West Virginia Trail strategy is talking about engaging the legislature, don't forget that advocacy is an opportunity to influence the agencies that deal with this: Department of Natural Resources, local planning and zoning agencies. All of these have a role in advocacy. A role in advocacy. West Virginia Rivers did a survey of its supporters just to kind of get a feel for whether people saw themselves as advocates, and to our pleasure, we found out most people already were advocating. They talked to a legislator or called their mayor, run into a city council member at Kroger. And what they were telling us, what our supporters were telling us, that the needs were to learn more about the issues, what to say about a particular issue, and how to communicate that, what technologies, what strategies are available. We also ask, how do you feel about advocacy? People had an overall positive experience, but, like anything, there's going to be some frustrations. There's always a concern, hey, I'm just kind of beating my head against the wall and nothing's changing. So there are some frustrations that are going to go along in advocacy. And one of the things that I think is very important to note, I'm going to use an example here about that, is advocacy takes time. We're going to do a little vignette here in a minute where it's going to be a very quick resolution, but that's because we only have a few minutes to chat here. This is a timeline of PFAS relevant times. PFAS, as you all know, are the forever chemicals, and it's been a process. We had great success last legislative session passing the PFAS Protection Act, but that was after years of work of bringing attention to the problem, getting a concurrent resolution for a study by the applicable agency, getting the water test study results, and then in 2023 we got an act passed. But that doesn't end the timeline either of advocacy, because there has to be implementation. The action plans have to be done, and those are another opportunity for advocacy. So keep in mind that advocacy is not a one-time thing. It's not limited to the 60 days of the legislative session. It's a year-round process, and it's not just passing the legislation, it's implementing the legislation and making sure the legislation is successful. So let's do a little vignette. And we're going to suppose for a minute you've been assigned an important job for West Virginia Trails. You want to engage the legislature to pass Bill number 420, which is our West Virginia statewide All Trail Strategy Act of 2024. And you'll see that kind of combines two of the goals, to have the statewide strategy and also to engage the legislature. And it sounds like it's mission impossible. How are you possibly going to do this? And you've got to immediately have that, oh, wow, I've committed to be an advocate. How am I going to turn this into mission possible? I'd like to start you off by thinking about how we at Rivers, West Virginia Rivers, look at the policy advocacy process. And we really emphasize that there's an inside game and an outside game. The inside game is we work with West Virginia Environmental Council. We use their lobbyist. Our executive director is also a lobbyist. That's the inside game. Folks that are lobbyists that can go and talk about policies, work in Charleston to develop relationships with the folks that are our elected officials, so that when a bill does come along, there's already a relationship built. There's already some level of trust and communication going on, and there's a believability that our lobbyists are providing truthful and accurate information. But no inside game is going to work alone. It's very important also to have an outside game, and that's where you assigned to pass this particular legislation come in. That's mobilizing folks to send emails and to call their legislator and to talk to their legislators, to have events, to have rallies, a press conference, whatever's going to draw attention to the issue and to the proposal, and also show these folks on the inside, the elected officials, that there is in fact a lot of public support for this West Virginia statewide All Trails Strategy Act of 2024. And we'll talk about what the outside advocates and what you as advocates can do without being a lobbyist, without being in Charleston 60 days out of the year. And that's telling your story. The lobbyists are going to give them the facts and the figures. A visitor to a local trail brings $101.22 or whatever the number is per day in economic revenues. But the outside game is going to come in and say, I just love this trail. I grew up on it. My family took me on it. I now can take my children on it. Just that personal story that makes so relatable to our legislators. So that's kind of a quick view of the inside-outside game. Now we're going to assume a couple of things. We're going to assume that the act itself is in good form. It's important when you file legislation, or when you can't file legislation unless you're an elected official. When a legislation is filed, it has bipartisan support, lots of sponsors. In West Virginia, we deal in a reality of a supermajority by one party. They have 31 of 34 Senate seats and 89 of 100 House seats. So you're going to need bipartisan support. You're going to need lots of sponsors. You want to file a bill that has a showing of support, especially among key legislators, a key committee person or that sort of thing. And we're also going to assume that you kind of know some of the terms and procedures, and we'll go over them quickly. To pass a law in West Virginia, and it's the same at the United States, and it's the same everywhere other than Nebraska, which has just one chamber in its legislature. In West Virginia, you have to pass the same bill by the House of Delegates and by the West Virginia Senate, and then the governor signs the bill. Same thing at the national level. House of Representatives, U.S. Senate have to pass the identical bill, and the current president then has to sign the bill. Normally, you want to file a bill, an identical bill in each chamber, both the House of Delegates and the Senate. The reason is it just might start to move or get some traction or get a hearing in one chamber other than the other, but you don't have to. You can file a bill in just one house. Once the bill is filed, it's going to be assigned to one or more committees that have specialties in that particular area. There's a recreation committee where a trails bill is probably going to go. Committees are key. They are a great advocacy opportunity. Don't miss the committees. That's where sometimes people try to stick in provisions that weaken the idea or make a bad provision, or it's sometimes an opportunity to amend it to make it a little better. But it's a key opportunity to be for advocacy. So advocates that are trying to pass this West Virginia statewide all trails strategy for 2024 need to know what committee it's assigned for, who the chairman is, what when this particular bill is set for a hearing, and use these advocacy opportunities. And probably the last term to know, at least for a West Virginia context, is the concept of crossover day. West Virginia's legislature meets for 60 days. It ends at 12 midnight on the 60th day. You can't turn the clock back an hour. Whatever hadn't passed by that point is called dead. It just hasn't passed. But a bill has to leave the chamber of its origin by the 50th day, which for 2024 is February 28th. The idea is then that gives the other chamber, either the House of Delegates or the Senate, time to do the committee hearings, to read the bill on 3 particular days, that sort of thing. Now, this is an important caveat. They can and they do change the procedures. They waive going to committee. They waive the 3 readings in 3 days. They waive the crossover. But normally, you're going to have that kind of time and those advocacy opportunities. So with that assumption and understanding kind of some of the terms and procedures, let's talk about how we look at advocacy over time. First of all, it's not 60 days, it's full time. It's something that goes on and is important both for the inside game of building relationships and for the outside game of getting people motivated and active in a type of provision. At the bottom of the pyramid are 2 things: awareness and engagement. You know, you're never going to be an advocate for the trail if you're not aware that trails exist in public lands and the land trusts and other type of place. And then with awareness, you're going to kind of get to know, well, you know, I like this trail, but it seems like they're not maintaining it properly or whatever. So as you become aware of it and interested in it, you're going to start engaging with the idea of trails. Maybe I'm going to talk to somebody about the trails they use. I'm going to read more in the newspaper or watch more TikTok videos on trails, and I'm going to kind of get engaged. And so at that point, I'm aware of the issue, I'm engaged in it, I'm interested, I know some facts about it, and now I have my opportunities to start being advocates. We call the kind of initial easiest type of advocacy digital advocacy. Many of you are probably on the West Virginia Rivers email list. If you're not, I would encourage you to join it. We send out action alerts on various issues, and they're really very simple to use. It'll be an email, you know, dear Mike, the legislature's meeting and they have Bill 420 in front of it, and the committee's going to meet next week. Click this button and send an email to the committee members that you support the bill. You click the button, up pops a kind of a pre-printed email that you can edit a little bit. And then you hit send and it automatically goes to the 8, 9, 10, 11 members of that committee. So that's great and that's important. And if people do nothing more than that, it's critical. They're a critical component of the outside game because they're putting emails in legislators' inboxes or agency folks' inboxes saying, we want you to do this. But we like to engage people in a little bit what we consider higher levels of advocacy. First is kind of self-explanatory. That's calling. You know, I personally don't like picking up the phone, but you know, that idea of you pick up the phone and you call Senator Jones's office and you talk to Senator Jones or to a staff person, and never underestimate the power of talking to staff people. Just, hey, you know, this is coming in front of Senator Jones's committee tomorrow. Just want to let him know that I support Bill 420. And so those calls can be very effective. But the top of the advocacy pyramid is a one-on-one meeting. It can be Zoom or in person. And, you know, it can even be running into them at Kroger. Because remember, it's a year-long process. It doesn't just focus on the 60 days, but we want to have local folks sit down with their local representatives. Everybody's got 2 senators in West Virginia and 1 delegate, and start to build that relationship that we're building on the inside game, but build it in the outside game as well. So this is what we tell folks about the 9 steps to a successful meeting. And they're kind of broken down to planning the meeting, and what do you do after the meeting. And they're pretty self-explanatory and they're pretty obvious when you think about it, but it's important to know. You got to set the meeting. And we have part-time legislators in West Virginia. It can be a little hard to get a hold of them, but you know, you set the meeting and you have to know why you want to set the meeting. What's my story about trails? Why are trails important to me? Why is the A trail in Park B important to me? What is it that I want to say to my representative? And number 3 probably applies to all stages. You just want to be courteous, on time, polite. We just don't think that aggressive confrontational advocacy works. Sitting down and telling your story and engaging with the legislature, we believe works best. So then you have the meeting. First of all, remember, especially during the legislative session, you're not going to have a lot of time. You'd be lucky to get 5-10 minutes on somebody's calendar. So be sure to tell your story. You know, it's much more powerful to hear from a constituent. This is what I do on Trail A, and this is why trails are important to me. And we really need the All Trail Strategy Act of 2024 to make sure that my trail does that. So you list 1 or 2 or 3 concerns. You want to have a very focused kind of statement. And then it's also very important to have what we call an ask. I want you to vote for Bill 420. I want you to vote against the amendment that's going to weaken it, whatever it is, and give them something. You know, just a fact sheet or 1-pager. They're not going to read long reports. A graphic is great. Your name and phone number or email is great, that kind of stuff. And then we have the follow-up. You know, thank them for the meeting and then follow up. It can be as simple as an email a couple of days later. Senator Jones, really enjoyed meeting with you. Appreciate your time, and I hope you'll consider our bill. It's really that simple. Now, what's the most important thing that can happen at the meeting? Well, you know, obviously, I guess the most important is Senator Jones goes, this is a great idea. I'm going to vote for it, and I'm going to bring, you know, 18 senators along, and we're going to pass this thing. That would be great. But the really best thing that can happen in a meeting is the question you cannot answer. And we all go, oh no, I look like an idiot. I should know this. It's embarrassing to say I don't know the answer. I would respectfully invite you to look at it a different way. Welcome the question you don't know the answer to, because it's an automatic second contact. All you have to do is go, Senator Jones, that's a good question. And I just don't know. But I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go find out the answer. And can I set up a phone call next Thursday, or can I send you an email? You've automatically built in your second contact with them. So as scary as admitting you don't know the answer, I don't know the answer to the question, it's a good thing that can happen at a meeting. So you've done your advocacy, you've taken on this mission, you've had your one-on-one meeting. So the statewide strategy, All Trails Strategy Act of 2024, because of your advocacy efforts, passed. And it's time to celebrate. So let's do a little bit of talk about the last legislative session and kind of how we, as part of many groups involved, were able to have a pretty good year at the legislature. We passed the PFAS Protection Act. As I said earlier, that was a multi-year process of step by step, but and we had our outside folks sending those emails and making those calls, and it got passed. Of particular interest to me in the public lands, to this group, there was a state bill to reauthorize Cabway Lingo as a motorized trail. That's going to happen. In the committee, there was an attempt to amend that to authorize motorized trails in all state forests. They tried that twice. Both times, West Virginia Rivers and other groups mobilized that outside, but sent those emails in, and both attempts were defeated in committee. Then at the state, at the House of Delegates chamber on second reading, the second day the bill was before the House of Delegates, somebody made an amendment to say there will be no more motorized trails in state parks or forests. And again, we activated the folks that send those emails, and that passed on voice vote. Didn't even have to take a roll call on it. And we also, in the same process, got more oil and gas well inspectors. We have a travesty in West Virginia where we had 10 inspectors for about 75,000 wells. Pretty obvious, wells don't get inspected. We now have 20 inspectors. It's a start, but it's that same advocacy process that we're able to deliver those successful wins. So kind of pulling back from the legislature, other trail advocacy opportunities. Federal agencies by law have to have a comment period and public involvement. They have to make the comments public. They have to say whether they agree with them or don't agree with them. So it's a good opportunity to do that. West Virginia agencies are increasingly having opportunities for public participation. You may remember this spring there was an attempt to bring in proposals for an RV park and resort level amenities into Capon State Park. There was a huge outcry locally and statewide. A lot of outside game involved in that, and they withdrew the plans, and in fact opened up a website to take public opinion on what should happen to state parks in general and Capon in specific. And don't forget those long-term reports that are going to be around for a while. There's a state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that's required. We as West Virginians for Public Lands just submitted a comment for what we would like to see happen in the planning of that. We were very proud to have 12 sign-ons, including West Virginia Trails and Mountain Bike Association and some others. And don't forget things like the forest plan. That's a little ways out for that to happen again, but for the Mon Forest anyway. But there are opportunities to make sure that things like appropriate trail maintenance and planning and upkeep are part of the forest plan and the forest priorities. The forest proposals that they send out often, they're about timbering primarily, but sometimes there's a plan to build a new trail, or you may know of a trail that needs to be maintained or upkept in the area of that particular plan. So it's an excellent opportunity to advocate with the Forest Service. So we did the little vignette and kind of humorously, one person against the world and got this bill passed, but really you're not alone. You need to build, and you are part of, and already building a coalition. Kelly alluded to it. When you hire the executive director, they're going to be able to do the things like build the email list and use the social media and website to keep people informed about trail opportunities and keep them engaged and involved, and ways to do that. And your executive director may want to look into some of the plans or computer websites and apps that allow for the sending of group emails and clicking on a button and sending an email to a decision maker. So you're already part of a coalition. Keep building it. Look to the Common Cause folks. I just threw out a couple of names there. But think outside of the green box. Think outside of the trail box. Don't forget the convention and visitors bureaus. Don't forget local businesses that depend on trail users to drink their coffee and stay in their lodge and eat their food. Look to groups like the Mon Forest Town or Woodlands Development. And I've got links on these. What I told Kelly I'd do is I send this as a PDF, and you'll be able to click on these links and see how they do things and that sort of stuff. So vignette aside, it's important to build coalition, build it with the unexpected folks, build it with as many different folks as you can, the recreation users, the conservation folks, the people that economically benefit from enhanced, appropriate, nature-based, non-motorized recreation. And just to keep you informed of a couple of dates that are coming up for the 2024 for some options for advocacy. Of course, there's the legislature, which starts January 10th. West Virginia Rivers Coalition is doing an event on the state capitol complex the evening before to commemorate the 10-year water crisis anniversary called Clean Water for All. It's an opportunity to be part of that. West Virginia Environmental Council does an E-Day on February 13th. West Virginia Trails probably has an opportunity to table there, to be part of it, to send your folks to go talk to legislators to be part of that. Reach out. Black Policy Day is a similar type of event. West Virginia Rivers Coalition / West Virginians for Public Lands, an alliance with the E-Council, with the Citizens Action Group, and some others are doing trainings for E-Days. Reach out to me. We'll get you onto that to give you a little bit more and in-depth of what I kind of talked about today. So that's kind of it. Jump in. It's a lot of fun to advocate. And just think about our two, and like I said, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Anything I can do to help you behind the scenes or run an idea by me or whatever. I got the easiest email in the world, mjones@wvrivers.org. Reach out anytime. Now, remember our two questions. We've kind of gone over this quickly. What do you think will work best for engaging with the legislature? And to make it personal, what are you now thinking about doing? So at this point, I'm going to stop my slides. And if there's any questions or feedback, I'm happy to do that, or we can talk about these questions. So I'll turn it back to you,
Thanks,
Kelly.
Mike. Yeah, and we had those questions posted in the chat there. Love to just take a few minutes if any of this resonated for you, if you've done something before that you feel like really worked well in engaging legislators or state agencies and decision makers, as Mike mentioned in the beginning. I'd just love to hear your thoughts, experience, or anything that popped up for you. And you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand. Everybody has the ability to do that. And if we don't, right now, that's okay. Maybe we can talk a little bit more at the end during the discussion, but I'll just say, Mike, that I really appreciate the inside-outside game perspective, the headspace, heart space piece. I know at Rails to Trails Conservancy, when we're doing advocacy at the federal level, we're always thinking about the heart space piece, right? And connecting the member of Congress with their local trail and understanding what is that personal connection that they might already have to the trail. And Eric will talk a little bit about how different coalitions and efforts in some of these states actually work together to do events that bring decision makers into the space so that they can kind of have more awareness of what the trail is, what its impacts are on the community, what it could be on the community. So I'll use this then as a time to segue over to Eric to give us a little perspective on kind of the type of advocacy work that's happening in other states around trails. And again, just encourage you all to be thinking about some of these questions. Would love to hear from you at the end. Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you all for being here. And Mike, thank you. That was awesome. And I'll start by saying what you finished with, Mike. Like, if anybody is has any trepidations, or you're a little intimidated about going to the State House or going to advocate in any way, shape, or form, it really is fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really a fun thing to do. And so by all means, take advantage of things like E-Day or other opportunities to just get inside the game a little bit. It's a really good time. I enjoy it. Maybe not everybody does, but it's the least intimidating thing you'll do when you're working in trails. It really is. The barrier to walking through office doors at the State House or anywhere. The moment you walk through those doors, they're just people, right? You're just having a conversation with somebody about things that you care about, and it's really fun. So don't if anybody feels sheepish about it, just go, especially when there's an organized day, and you'll have people that are there who have done it forever, and you can really just kind of get your feet wet, see how it works, and it's a very comfortable, and eventually, if not the first time, it eventually gets really fun. All right, let's see if I can mess up the shared screen. I have faith that I can. Guys, give me a little bit of feedback that it's working, and I'll roll with it.
We
good? All right.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Are we good? All right, great. So I'm going to mainly talk about what we've been able to do in Ohio and Indiana. I'll touch on Wisconsin as well. We have a long history as an organization in federal and state advocacy. And starting about 6 years ago, we were trying to be a little more strategic around how we can be most effective at state houses here in the Midwest. And there's a lot that we thought could happen. But again, pointing to what Mike put in there towards the end, no one organization is going to be able to be effective in state advocacy if they're trying to do it alone. It is all about partnerships and coalition building, period. It doesn't matter how big and well-resourced and smart and staffed up you think you are. The surest way to not be successful in advocacy is to go it alone. And I can guarantee you in the trail world, that's more so than maybe almost any other sector that's advocating at the State House. We are not strong enough, sometimes even together. We certainly aren't strong enough with anybody trying to go at it alone. So it's all about coalition building and partnerships. And you have to think about your strategy at a state level. Everything is contextual, right? What works in one state, and as an organization that does work across the country, we have to be extremely conscious of this, that what's working really well in Ohio may have almost zero transferability to West Virginia or to Pennsylvania or to Wisconsin. There may be some aspects and some lessons learned, but trying to take a cookie cutter approach to advocacy, state to state, and quite frankly, office to office, right? Advocacy is about personal connection with decision makers and with the people who you're trying to talk to. And so the story that resonates or the approach that you have has to be tailored to those people, right? And that's where you have to do your homework. So when we approach statewide advocacy, it is all about the history, culture, and the current climate of that state. And it's fluid. It's a fluid situation, right? But if you are not taking into account, if you're not, there's all kinds of silly one-liners. If you're not reading the tea leaves, if you're not whatever it is, understand the climate that you're working in. And trails right now in the current political climate that we are in, Mike said it, I'm in the same, I'm in Ohio. We have a supermajority Republican legislature here as well. It's not quite as skewed, but hey, supermajority, right? At a certain point, the numbers are what they are. But I will say, working in the trail space, we are one of the, unfortunately, for all of us, but one of the few places where true bipartisanship is still happening at the state level. Like, we are working on an issue that crosses political boundaries. Many times it's about the messaging that there may be some messaging that you have a little bit of a different message when you're walking into certain legislators' office. But the bottom line is, at the state level, no matter where we are, no matter what the makeup of a legislature is, trails are a winning strategy and a winning message across the political divide. And no matter what we think on a personal level, sometimes even on a professional level about any individual elected official or any state, any party, the bottom line is they're all looking for opportunities for success across the political aisle, right? Because they're so few and far between these days. It really is an opportunity for us in the trail world. We have a bipartisan issue in a climate where there's very little bipartisan work being done. And no matter how jaded you get, believe me, elected officials would love to find a successful strategy to work across the aisle on something. Many of them are going to be looking on their political flank and making sure it's not going to cost them politically. Trails are such a good issue for that, right? Their constituents love it. They can work on something bipartisan that isn't costing them politically. It's a winning strategy. It really, really is. And so we work with partners, right? We are a national organization. We have some state-based staff. Kelly's in Pennsylvania. I'm in Ohio. We have people in Wisconsin and different places around the country. But at the end of the day, we're a national organization. We have to, and we want to, and have to work with state and local partners in these places. So we typically look for a statewide organization that is aligned with us already, that we already do work with. And so in these states, we worked with the Ohio Trails Partnership in Ohio, the Wisconsin Bike Fed in Wisconsin, and the Greenways Foundation of Indiana. Statewide organizations that already have built-in constituencies, that already have have staff on the ground who understand the issues. And so, what we are doing really is helping with strategy and helping with support around crafting a strategy. The other thing that we went into this whole process with, and we started in Ohio, then Indiana and Wisconsin came on a couple of years later around this statewide strategy, saying, how do we create a systematic advocacy approach in these states? Instead of being single issue or single bill, is there a multi-year advocacy strategy that we think will give us an opportunity to make wholesale positive change over time in these states, more so than any single bill or any single program that we think we might be able to effectively advocate for? So the first thing we did was a quick, where is the statewide planning documents in each of these places? And we start with a state trail plan. Do these states have state trail plans? If they do, how old are they? When's the last time they've been updated? And it was easy for us in Ohio because I live here. I've been here quite a long time. Said, look, ours is 20 years old. It wasn't good the day it was published. This is our opportunity. And we went out and met with some legislators, again, bipartisan, also super key in building any of this. Met with a bipartisan and bicameral group of legislators and talked to them about the concept of creating a Trails Caucus. What we wanted to do was make advocacy more effective, but also less burdensome on the trail community. How can we talk to 30, 40, 50 legislators who are predisposed to want to hear about trails and trail issues, can we get them in one place at one time and do presentations to 40 or 50 of them instead of setting up 40 or 50 individual meetings, which is both logistically and time-wise really demanding. And we had pretty enthusiastic reception from legislators on both sides of the aisle, and we created the first ever Trails Caucus, the Ohio Trails Caucus, and it allowed us to present a legislative agenda. Look, this is what we want to get done. The first thing on it, we need a new state trail plan. They thought, wow, what a great idea. Within 1 year of creating this caucus, we had this group, and it initially started with 35. We're up to almost 65 now. We're getting close to half of the entire legislature being signed on as members of the Legislative Trails Caucus in Ohio. Almost 50-50 Democrat. There's more Republicans than Democrats, but it's close to half and half, which is great. So we had them create, we had them demand and then fund a state trail plan initiative, right? And then all of our partners across the state were part of creating that state trail plan. So let's get a process in place that empowers the local trail advocates and municipal and local agency people who are engaged in trails in Ohio to help craft this new state trail plan. And it's not like this was top secret, right? We were talking about this very openly. But we had a multi-year rationale for starting with this planning process and having it come from the legislature, not from an agency. And while it was crafted under the Department of Natural Resources, it was mandated by the Trail Caucus. And so we knew once this document was done, we need to ensure that it has things in this document that we really want to see happen over the next 5-10 years in Ohio, because then implementation, we're not going back to the legislature with all these other ideas. Hey, now we want to see dedicated funding to maintenance. Now we want to see a process put in place to designate priority corridors for development. Now, each of those on their own are meaningful, but advocating for that at the legislative level is 50-50 at best and probably much less. But when it's embedded in a plan that was mandated by this group of legislators, and then we come back the year after in the next session and say, hey, you guys did a great job this is your plan, right? This state trail plan belongs to you, the Legislative Trail Caucus. This is your state trail plan now. Now we're here to help you implement your own plan. It's a little harder for them to say no to the implementation asks that we make in advocacy when the implementation asks are embedded in a plan that they themselves mandated get done. So now we're 3 years post-plan saying, and each of our advocacy efforts now are about implementation of their plan. And we make sure the messaging is always about that. This isn't our plan. We helped create it, but it's yours. You mandated that it gets done. So now let's do what you mandated, because certainly no state representative, no state senator mandated a plan get done to get put on a shelf and never implemented, right? Like, what kind of elected official champions a plan? You want what's in the plan to be implemented. So implement your own ideas, guys. And it's been extremely effective. The other thing that we've done with this Legislative Trails Caucus, as well as in Indiana, is, I should have went to this slide sooner, right? Make it theirs. Make sure they understand that the plan is theirs so that we're implementing their vision, the one that they mandated happen. But we also make sure that we are inviting them, and we make sure all our partners on the ground are inviting their legislators to every public event on a trail they possibly can, right? Get them out there to experience the trail, make sure that they are invited to every groundbreaking, every ribbon cutting, public events on the trail. We will manufacture public events for our partners if we need to. If there's a strategic need for a certain member in the legislature, hey, so, Senator Dolan is chairing finance in this session. We need to make sure he's got trails front and center. Great. Hey, newly elected mayor of Cleveland who courted the bike and trail advocates in your town to get elected. You're going to host Senator Dolan on a trail ride down here. I mean, we're just constantly making strategic connections around getting these people out so that they understand why and what it is they're supporting. The other piece is, man, celebrate your wins, right? And give your state legislators all the credit. Who cares if they actually did much? Who cares? They get all the credit. They are front and center every time you're opening a new section of trail, or you've done, you planted 100 trees along the trail and you have a public event. That state senator, they made it happen. And you invite them there and you shower them with praise and tell them how important it is that they have championed this and that they're so supportive. Sometimes you're swallowing your pride doing it. You got to do it. It pays off. Celebrate wins and invite them in. You need friends. The other thing we've done, so the Ohio piece was really about developing the state trail plan. The Indiana piece was almost the inverse, right? Indiana had a flood of funding. And again, we don't always criticize where the funding comes from, but they sold their sold their interstate, their turnpike, and turned that into a multi-billion-dollar investment in infrastructure, including a new trail funding process. Well, we knew immediately that one-time glut of money is not going to be sustainable in a state like Indiana, which again is pretty fiscally conservative. And so we went in with the same the same idea that we did in Ohio, except it wasn't about planning. It was about ensuring some protection to that money over the long term, and immediately had the same sort of reception in Indiana we did in Ohio. The State House in Indianapolis, within 3 weeks of finding our champions who agreed to be co-chairs of a Legislative Trails Caucus, there was more than 40 members that signed on to the Legislative Trails Caucus. Overwhelmingly Republican. It's about 60-40 Republican Democrat. And they have been hugely helpful in the last few years in making sure that the continued spending of this windfall of money in the state, that there's a decent chunk of that keeps going into the next level trail program. Just in the last 4 years, Indiana, again, fairly small state, not very big in population, doesn't, not sitting on top of a wealth of resources that brings them a ton of money. They've invested $180 million in the last 4 years in building multi-use trail in Indiana. $180 million, which puts every other Midwestern state to shame. Frankly, it's probably more. It's probably more than the 6 or 7 Great Lakes states put together in the same time. I mean, it's amazing what Indiana has done. And the lesson in Indiana really is about leadership, right? Their governor, Eric Holcomb, decided trails were something that mattered to him. It's amazing when you have one person that has the bully pulpit, what they can do. He decided that a chunk of this multi-billion-dollar windfall was going to go to trail development, and he's been steadfast in that. So leadership matters as well. I'm trying to be conscious of time. Kelly, I'm going to stop so we can have some Q&A. I'm sorry that was fast.
Thanks, Eric. No, that's great. And, I hope that the information and the kind of experience from these other places maybe spark something for you. We know that the Legislative Caucus is a really useful system to have in place, right, to advance some of these goals. It might not always be the solution for every state. There's lots of other ways that we can be engaging with our state legislators. And going back to Mike's first point initially, we also need to be engaging the agencies, right, to the state agencies that are active in either supporting projects or implementing them. So I think, we want to make sure if anybody has just questions or thoughts, anything in response to what our panelists said, any ideas or experiences that you want to share, please don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you. And you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand. I know a bunch of people are on the phone too, so you can feel free to unmute. I'm just curious, maybe even putting in the chat if this sparked anything for you in terms of what you think is going to work best to engage with West Virginia state legislators in the coming years, or what are you going to do to advocate, knowing that, thinking about Mike's advocacy pyramid and how, you're doing it over time, and the kind of first piece and always is like building those relationships.
Kelly, I think Wes came off mute. He might have.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Wes, thank you.
Well, I think really, the resources that you all are providing are going to be immense in helping us here in West Virginia. Just because you've been there, done that, and shown how it's worked in other states. I think the big thing for us is just the networking aspect of it, and realizing that, hey, these are just people, and they have a lot of similar interests. Their constituents have a lot of similar interests. And it's also about show me the dollars and show me the money. And we look at and see what tourism has done, especially since the pandemic. And those are things that pretty much doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, everybody can get behind and just stay abreast of the issues and stay on top of things. So I think we all just need to continue to get out in our community. I saw someone, I think the city manager from Fayetteville's on here. I mean, they can definitely tell you what's happened down in the New River Gorge area and all across that area in the last few years. So those are the main things, and don't be afraid to ask for help, because it seems like everybody here is definitely willing to offer the helping hand. And it's all about the the greater good, which is I think why we're all here. And making things happen. We don't have to take the credit for it. We just want to make sure it happens, and then we can all enjoy it.
Thanks, Wes. That was really great. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, Charles had a great comment in chat about taking more senators for a bike ride. But that's an excellent idea. You're interested in trails, find the trail near the state capitol, organize a trail event, and get them out there. That's great advocacy.
I love
thank
that.
you, Charles, for that.
Yeah, really appreciate that. And just a comment that Wes made brought something up for me, just in thinking about, the role that tourism plays in demonstrating, local economic development in communities across the state. And I think that there are ways of thinking about advocacy and building those relationships is like making sure that your local, county or tourism convention and visitors bureau, right, that those tourism regional and local groups know about the trails, know about how to get the best information to visitors, and they can be a really strong partner too, because they're in communication, right, with the state tourism agency, which also is very influential in, I think, how decisions get made around investments in projects that impact tourism. So I love that idea. Anybody else want to be sure?
Yeah, can I chime in real quick? Clay Elkins here.
Please.
Yeah,
hey,
I was just gonna say, I mean,
go ahead.
I was meeting with one of our local mayors just this morning and a couple council members, and it's amazing how much they don't understand it. And when you just talk to them and the benefits that it can do for kids and the health of their communities, it really makes an impact for them to see it, not just in regards to tourism or economic development, but to the health. And that's one of those things that's bipartisan as well.
I love that. That's
Clay,
so important, Clay. Thank you.
Yeah, Clay, I think one thing that strikes me with what you just said is those of us who work in trails all the time, I think we sometimes do. We just assume that some of those basic benefits are everybody knows that, right? Like I think, and the longer you do this, sometimes I think it's easier for you to assume certainly an elected official or a town leader or somebody in a position of power, they know all these things, right? This isn't rocket science. They must. Don't assume that people know the things that maybe to you seem really simple and really matter of fact. Don't assume. Some of those really easy, impactful things that you may know and they may seem second nature to you, to Clay's point, they might be really profound to some of these local leaders or state leaders. So don't assume any of that. It's amazing how many times things you think are just super easy to figure out or super well known, it's easy for us to be in our own bubble.
Absolutely. If you ask a lot of these local leaders, where do the kids go ride their bikes when they get out of school? Most of them are going to say in the road. and so that opens up a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for that. It does make me think a lot about just kind of going back to what we said about engaging decision makers and your local elected officials in those programming and events opportunities that you might have in your on your trails. And I just wanted to drop a link here for a national day that RTC hosts called Celebrate Trails. You can sign up to be a part of that national day to celebrate trails. We provide some resources and in how to engage around different activities, but those types of events are the perfect place for those local decision makers or state legislators to be invited and to see the impacts on the ground that Clay, you were just talking about, right? Because we can go to our elected officials with our fact sheets and one pagers about, whatever the return on investment is, but really seeing it in action is often the most impactful. So I love that as well. All right. Unless anybody else has anything. Yeah, sure.
I'm interested to know where we are in like the state level and being like an organized effort to advocate. Are we waiting for the executive director position to get filled with West Virginia Trail to begin organizing more of those efforts and collectively reaching out, or kind of like where we stand as of today, and then what are some of our like timeline goals with that?
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, I think a big part of what the efforts of West Virginia Trail is around getting this full-time position to really activate this, right? Because I'm sure a lot of us are either involved with all volunteer groups, and we know there's like a certain amount of capacity that we have to advance our goals when that's the case. And I do think, just not to speak on behalf of the organization, but just to say I think a big part of what's next is this new position being able to have the time to connect with all of you in a more meaningful way, to grow the voice, to look and create more probably like formal partnerships with some of those common cause groups that Mike mentioned, right? Like how can we as a Trails advocacy organization be working alongside some of the other statewide organizations that have, where we have some shared goals. So I would just encourage anybody who's interested in this kind of work, please do stay engaged. You can do that through me and I can pass it along to the board, or, if you are working directly with somebody that's on the board too, just to let them know, because then I would say the new full-time position would have them kind of a base of people that they know that they can engage with to kind of come up with what is the like organizing strategy, right? Or what are we going to work towards? But I think for in these first couple years of just getting formed, a big part of it is just kind of establishing a space and a kind of like venue for local trail advocates to come together. So it's like the convening piece. I hope that answers your question, Corey.
I know one of the goals of West Virginia Trail was to form a trail caucus in the legislature. Did that ever take place, or where is that?
So we did work for quite a while and had we were looking toward that bipartisan, bicameral support and identifying 4 legislators that would help be the formation of the caucus. And there was kind of at the end of the day a sticking point around West Virginia Trail's focus on non-motorized trails. So there was some concern among the legislators that were starting to form the caucus that our efforts were not inclusive of motorized interests. And that kind of put a halt to it for now. But it's kind of why, I wanted to bring up that a caucus might not be the right solution when it comes to what we're doing at the state level to be engaging legislators. I don't think it's necessary, but it certainly is, you know, kind of a powerful system to have in place. We could try it again. It's something that we could try again.
And what I
Thank you.
should have made clear is it's been a mixed success, right? What worked well in Ohio didn't work at all in Wisconsin. And so a caucus is a good idea that can work, but again, there is no one size fits all. So I wouldn't pre-prescribe that what West Virginia absolutely needs is a trail caucus. Maybe down the road there's an opportunity and it should be revisited, but I wouldn't get held up by just one tactic. There's multiple ways to get at this. And if a caucus isn't the right way right now, that's fine. There's other approaches. It wasn't in Wisconsin. It was not an effective approach there.
I do think that part of what some of the engagement strategies have been in some states to create awareness and momentum around trails and at the State House is to host a series of events as part of a year of the trail. So North Carolina has done that, Ohio did that, Alabama's in the process of putting together a statewide trails plan so that they will then launch a year of the trail. And it's just a way of highlighting existing trails and, you know, the impact that they have on communities as part of a year-long series of events to really engage local and state elected officials too. So, you know, that's just another idea of something that's been successful that doesn't have outcomes like, you know, a caucus mandating a trail plan like Ohio did, but it does have the outcome of really growing that awareness and support of local and state elected officials in a way that gets them connected to the trails in their own communities and that their constituents use. So please do be in touch. I see a couple of questions here about non-motorized and equestrian trails conflict. I think that kind of question has a lot to just do with the characteristics of that specific local trail and the user groups there. So that answers to that question really vary. But we do see these are super helpful comments because they will help us guide the work of the new executive director of the organization and also think about how we can engage with you all in the future too. I just want to thank everybody. We'll send a follow-up email and post a recording on the website as well as the slides. Really appreciate your all's time today and engagement.
Yeah,
thank you, Mike and
being
Eric.
part of it. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Bye.